In a world where everyone strives to find their place, there's sometimes a feeling that we're all playing roles in a carefully staged play. If you've ever felt like an outsider among your own, wondering about the motives that drive people to conform so desperately, or if social interactions seem like a pointless game you don't want to play, then this topic might resonate with you unexpectedly. The philosophy of pessimism, as presented by Arthur Schopenhauer, reveals a harsh reality. Many people live in a world of illusions, where their behavior, clothing, and speech are dictated not by inner convictions, but by the desire for social approval. But a key question arises: whose approval are we seeking? Think about how many times you've had to endure meaningless conversations just to avoid seeming rude. How many times have you had to laugh at unfunny jokes? Didn't it feel like every social interaction was a transaction where you had to give up a piece of yourself in exchange for a sense of belonging? And here's the main question: what is the price of this conformity? The answer might surprise you and make you reconsider a lot. Arthur Schopenhauer unequivocally stated, "The inevitable contradiction between high intelligence and successful social adaptation, the higher the level of mental development, the more obvious the meaninglessness of accepted conventions and social games becomes." This isn't due to arrogance, but to the ability to see the hidden motives and true essence of things that are inaccessible to most. An intellectual notices the hypocritical masks, the lies skillfully disguised as courtesy, and realizes the fragility of a world where everyone desperately seeks approval in the eyes of others. The saddest thing is that most people prefer to ignore these obvious truths. Modern society is designed to entertain and distract from deep reflection, as excessive thinking inevitably leads to the realization of universal incoherence and absurdity. One begins to understand that most interpersonal relationships are superficial, conversations turn into meaningless noise, and the desire to fit into a group is a form of self-destruction. This is the main dilemma. Possessing enough intelligence to realize all of the above, a person inevitably faces a deep sense of loneliness. The more reflection and analysis, the harder it becomes to find one's place in society. And people feel it. They sense detachment from the collective hysteria and unwillingness to participate in social rituals with blind devotion. This causes discomfort, as the very existence of an intellectual becomes a threat to the cozy bubble in which most reside. Arthur Schopenhauer, a German pessimist philosopher, once remarked that loneliness is the lot of all outstanding minds. This statement can evoke painful feelings, as society persistently instills the idea that happiness lies in communication, in having friends, and belonging to social groups. But what happens when most of these connections turn out to be superficial and meaningless? What happens when you realize that the price of socialization is abandoning the pursuit of excellence? In such a situation, a person begins to seek something more meaningful, gradually distancing themselves from society and valuing their time more than the approval of others. And here a surprising transformation occurs: loneliness, which initially seems like a punishment, eventually turns into a valuable privilege. In solitude, one discovers what society tries so hard to hide: peace of mind. Schopenhauer, like no other, understood this truth. For him, high intelligence was not only a gift, but also a burden. The deeper a person knows the world, the less it inspires admiration. The clearer one sees human nature, the less desire one has to participate in its games. It's a common misinterpretation to perceive this concept as a call to misanthropy or a complete refusal to communicate. However, the point is not at all about that, but about realizing the fundamental difference between interaction and a sense of duty. It's about giving oneself the right to decide independently when and with whom to maintain contact, without blindly obeying social expectations. It is important to accept as a given that genuine intelligence does not need external confirmation. The most interesting thing is that abandoning the pursuit of recognition entails internal changes. Those around begin to notice that the individual doesn't have an acute need for approval and doesn't strive at all costs to fit into the group. They see that their world won't collapse if they aren't invited to this or that event. Such behavior is disconcerting, as most people live captive to the need to be noticed, heard, and approved. By opting out of this game, an individual becomes an enigma, inspiring both fear and fascination. The paradox lies in the fact that the less one cares about social validation, the more power they wield over it. True independence blossoms when the opinions of others cease to hold sway. Therefore, the next time someone tries to convince you of the necessity of expanding your social circle, actively participating in social events, or conforming to societal norms, remember, the problem isn't with you, but with the fact that you've grasped a truth. However, this truth is often too inconvenient for most people to accept. And this is where it gets interesting. Having realized that public approval is not a prerequisite, and having learned that most social interactions are merely theatrical performances, a person begins to notice something else: silence. Silence becomes a faithful ally, which frightens others, as the modern world is filled with constant noise. Social media, empty chatter, news designed to provoke emotional reactions. All of this is aimed at maintaining a state of continuous distraction, because silence encourages reflection, and reflection, as we know, can be dangerous. Arthur Schopenhauer not only realized this, but also lived by this principle. He spent a significant part of his life away from society, dedicating himself to philosophy, music, and contemplation. And it wasn't out of hatred for people, but out of the understanding that worldly noise only clouds the mind. A common mistake that many make is confusing loneliness with isolation. However, there's a profound chasm between these states. Being alone is a manifestation of strength of spirit, a conscious choice in favor of depth of experience and personal reflection, a preference for quality of connections over quantity. Isolation, on the other hand, is a heavy burden, the lot of those who yearn to be part of society but cannot find their place, who strive for recognition but remain unaccepted. The paradox lies in the fact that a person desperately seeking approval is doomed to rejection, while one who consciously refuses it never experiences true loneliness. By following their own path, unconcerned with the opinions of others, an individual attracts those who truly matter, thoughtful, inquisitive people who don't seek to fill every moment with meaningless hustle and bustle. The truth is that intellect is not synonymous with asociality. Rather, it rejects triviality and superficiality. History knows many examples of outstanding minds who, while far from being antisocial, preferred not to waste precious time on pointless conversations. Leonardo da Vinci, engrossed in his ingenious projects, lived in creative solitude for years, without feeling the need to share every thought with the world. Isaac Newton, realizing that his innovative thinking was alien to most, distanced himself from society, dedicating himself to scientific research. Nikola Tesla worked on his inventions with a maniacal obsession, incomprehensible to many. All these geniuses seemed eccentric, strange, and difficult to communicate with to their contemporaries. The reason is simple. They did not conform to generally accepted norms, did not follow the script of ordinary social life. This is the secret. Social life often represents a series of predictable rituals designed to keep a person within the system. From birth, people are taught that social recognition is paramount, that it is necessary to have friends and be part of a group, and that loneliness is bad. However, no one talks about the fact that many social groups exist only because of the fear of loneliness, and not because of genuine intimacy. No one mentions that people surrounded by a large number of acquaintances often experience inner emptiness. The fact that the best ideas, great revolutions, and most important discoveries were born in the minds of those who dared to step away from the general noise and bustle is concealed. However, there is often confusion on this issue when people mistakenly believe that the solution lies in complete renunciation of society, in retreating into hermitage and isolation from the world. This is the wrong path. True strength lies not in escaping reality, but in knowing how to determine moments for interaction with it and moments for solitude. It is the art of staying in the shadows when there is too much noise around, and appearing with power when it becomes necessary. Let us remember the great strategists. They were not always at the epicenter of battles, but when they entered the game, their influence was undeniable. Those who possess a true understanding of life become neither slaves to society nor fugitives from it. They are inconspicuous players, strategically moving their pieces without advertising their actions. They build in the dark, and when the world realizes their presence, it is already too late, for victory is won without unnecessary noise. Schopenhauer asserted that supreme intellect is destined for solitude, not as a punishment, but as an advantage. It is in solitude that one can create something truly significant. But what happens to those who don't realize this? What happens to those who seek happiness solely in the approval of others? They fall into a vicious cycle of dependence. Every published photo, every told story, every expressed opinion, all are subordinated to one goal: to get a reaction, a like, a comment, a confirmation that gives them a sense of existence. However, the harsh reality is this: if your existence is entirely conditioned by the reaction of others, then a genuine life remains unattainable for you. You turn into a mere mirror reflection of other people's expectations, which is the direct opposite of freedom. For true freedom lies not in blindly following fleeting desires, but in independence from the approval of others when doing what you consider truly important. It's the ability to do without constant external noise, to feel the fullness of life, the ability to be alone and in silence, without experiencing discomfort or the need to fill every pause with distractions. And if you don't have this ability, then you are not free. You are a prisoner of vanity. Schopenhauer, like no other, understood this truth, and his departure from the world was not an act of rejection, but a carefully considered strategy. Only at a distance can you see reality in its true light. Only in silence can you hear your own inner voice. And if you have reached this understanding, then it means that deep down you already knew the truth. You felt that something was wrong with modern social life, that many of your interactions are just empty formalities, that true growth does not occur in vanity, but in deep self-analysis. Now, everyone faces a dilemma: whether there is enough courage to accept the truth as it is. After all, once you look it in the face, there is no turning back. Life is transformed, becomes unbearable in its ordinariness. Empty conversations seem meaningless, and the need for the approval of others disappears, leaving only the naked truth in return. The truth is that solitude is not a punishment, but rather a gift, a privilege available only to those who have enough strength of spirit to withstand it. There is no longer any possibility of deceiving yourself, no need to pretend that you enjoy what once seemed familiar, that empty conversations can satisfy, or that external recognition has any weight. And here it is, the point of no return, a moment frightening in its irreversibility. After all, most people spend their lives in fruitless attempts to fit into society, sacrificing their beliefs and desires for the sake of the approval of others, suppressing everything in themselves that might disturb someone else's peace. But now, when the veil of illusions has fallen, what is inaccessible to the understanding of the majority becomes clear. The meaning of life is not to meet other people's expectations, but to find what truly resonates in the heart, and have the courage to follow this path, even if it means going alone. Paradoxically, the bolder a person manifests their true essence, the stronger their attraction to others becomes. In a world where authenticity is a scarce commodity, people have an acute need for sincerity. Those who have the courage to be themselves, who move through life without fear and do not seek approval, inevitably attract attention and become opinion leaders. However, this is not because they strive for power, but because true freedom is a phenomenon so rare and unique that it cannot be ignored. Now, a logical question arises: how to dispose of this information? Of course, you can pretend that nothing happened, return to your usual life, and continue playing the imposed role. But there is another path, more difficult but also more rewarding. You can accept the discomfort of truth, come to terms with the fact that most will never understand, and stop betraying yourself in order to fit into someone else's framework. You can start living for yourself, not for others, guided by your own beliefs and values. Ultimately, humanity is divided into two camps: conformists and those who go their own way. The lion's share chooses the path of least resistance, adapting to circumstances, because it is comfortable and safe. But only a few who dare to find themselves are able to change the world. Which type do you belong to? If you have read to these lines, I ask you to leave a comment with the words, "Silence is power." After all, those who have grasped this truth are ready to enter the game called life, according to their own rules, without looking back at generally accepted norms and stereotypes.